today we're going to go over our Pompeian Mosaics assignment. And so there's different materials that we're going to be reviewing today that you guys are going to need to be successful for this project. So our first, we are definitely going to need a black, preferably thicker sheet of paper. So you guys can get cardstock, you guys can get construction paper, just as long as it's a little bit thicker than a standard sheet of copy paper, you guys are going to be on a good place. Another thing that you guys are definitely going to need is some thicker white paper, definitely white in this case. This is watercolor paper, but you guys can again get cardstock or anything like that to be painted on. If you guys have access to it, a bigger paintbrush, some watercolors, and if you guys do not have watercolors in your house, you definitely need a pencil. You also need some water, but if you guys don't have access to watercolors at your house, if you happen to have watercolor pencils, these are fantastic. These you just color like normally, and then you go over top of it with your paintbrush that's wet, and this will turn into paint for you. Or if you guys actually have access to markers, if you have something that's slick, so maybe a plate that has a shiny surface on it, like a paper plate, if you guys have some plastic, saran wrap, something that's just slicker. If you guys color on top of that with your markers, once you get that done, you're going to take your paintbrush, again with some water on it, and then paint over top of those marks, and it's going to turn into paint for you. So that way you're going to be able to paint on these white sheets of paper. So to be successful, you definitely need to make sure that you guys are thinking about our previous watercolor techniques. So these watercolor techniques, when you guys were working, remember you guys were doing wet on wet, you guys were doing wet on dry, you guys were using the bleeding techniques, salt techniques. So any of those techniques that we've been covering before, you definitely are going to want to bring them over to this assignment. The more that you guys do, the more visual interest that you're going to add into your piece.
So for the history of our project, we are going to be talking about the eruption that happened at Mount Vesuvius. So in your history classes, you probably heard about Mount Vesuvius and realized how impactful that eruption had occurred to all the people that lived there. So this happened in 79 AD, and this volcano buried the ancient city of Pompeii under a thick carpet of volcanic ash. What ended up occurring is that thick layer of ash actually protected all of the different artworks that were there. And some of the most famous pieces that are from Pompeii that were preserved are actually their mosaics. These mosaics were created out of different pebbles and stones, pieced together, and then put together into a gorgeous piece of art. One of the most famous pieces here is the Alexander mosaic. So this is actually a zoomed in copy of, or image of the Alexander mosaic, and you can see all the gorgeous details that you can see in all the different little pieces that they call tesserae. Now it's your turn. Please grab your pencil, your black paper, and your sketch to do your idea. Please make sure that you guys are focused on your major shapes and not on small details, because they do not translate well whenever you're working on your mosaic. So you can kind of see my sketch here. Now I've cut my paper and I've begun to do my final project. So I'm going to show you guys how to cut your pieces. So once your paper is dry, you guys are going to take your scissors and start cutting out thumbnail sized triangles and trapezoids. So here are some of my pieces here. If it's easier, you can see that bag off to the side. I like to keep them in there just so they don't get loose. And then now I'm going to start focusing on my edges of my object, whatever I've decided to make my project on. So I put on my glue, and then now I start focusing on each of the edges of that shape. So I take my tesserae of the color I need and start laying it on the edge. Once I filled in all of my edges, I go back in and do the center. Once that entire picture is complete, don't forget about doing your background as well and adding in the small details that you want. Now here's some examples. So this is the one that I had just completed. And you're going to notice that there's also gaps so that you can see the black spaces in between. Make sure you're keeping those gaps. Here's one that I've completed on white paper so you can see the difference in the contrast. And then this final one is one that I had a student complete a couple of years ago, and I absolutely love it. You'll also notice that her pieces are a lot smaller. You can go smaller, but at the same time it's going to take you a little bit longer. So for your mosaic project, what was most difficult for you? What was the most fun? And what can you keep in your memory bank for a future project? Thank you for watching.